Shifting Stones is a game that I knew nothing about until I saw a copy at my friendly local game store, and it looked very pretty. It said 1 to 5 players, 8 years and up, 20 minutes, so that seems to fit the bill of the kind of games that I'm playing these days when I'm mainly playing either by myself or with my kids who are currently 9 and 11. And so I thought, why not give it a try? Shifting Stones is a filler, definitely, an abstract filler with a strong puzzle feel to it, which is played around this grid of 9 double-sided tiles. Very nice production values here. These are nice, they are slightly embossed, so that makes them more pleasant to move around. They're double-sided, thick, very interesting art. And you also have a player aid that reminds you of the matches, which is meaning which symbol is on the other side of each. It is also very important that you establish when you set up the game, you set up a grid like this one, shuffle them randomly, create a random grid of 3x3. It's very important that you establish which side of the grid is the bottom and which one is the top, because the orientation of the grid remains the same for everybody, regardless of where they sit. Then you have this deck of cards here. They represent matches that you will try to create. They represent patterns that you will try to create on the grid in order to score the card. Each player receives 4 cards, and then players will alternate taking turns. During your turn, you can perform as many actions as you want and as many as you can based on the cards that you have available, because every time that you do something, it will cost you a card. The general idea is that you can discard a card to flip a tile to the other side, and or when you discard a card, you can also choose to switch 2 tiles on the grid instead. If any of the patterns represented on your cards are actually presently current on the grid, then you show the card to the opponents, and you can also score that, as it would happen in that case. Again, the orientation is important. This is the bottom, and so I can score that card. That's hooray! So after you switch tiles and or flip tiles and or score cards, then you replenish your hand until you have a hand of 4. The next player goes and you repeat the procedure. You repeat it until a certain number of cards have been scored, and that depends on the number of players, and at that point you look at the points that the scored cards are worth, and the player with the highest score wins the game. The game can also be played in solitaire. And actually I played the solitaire version also as a pure solo, just by myself, and also as a cooperative game. My daughter Louisa wanted to try the game, but didn't feel like playing a competitive game that day. So we simply played the solitaire version, just the 2 of us making decisions, and that's totally possible. The way it works, you prepare a mini deck of 16 cards with a specific number of cards from each range to form that deck, meaning that gives you not just a range of point values, but also a range of difficulty, as higher values are a lot harder to score. It is a mini deck of 16 cards, and simply you play solitaire and you're trying to score all of those cards. Just you playing as normal, discarding and trying to match those cards. If you complete a turn without scoring any cards, you gain a strike, and you can use any token or a card, the player rates for example, as to keep track of the strikes. And if you gain 4 strikes, so if you spend 4 turns without scoring anything, you lose the game. If you're able to score over your cards without getting 4 strikes, you win the solitaire, and again, solitaire/cooperative version. That makes it incredibly difficult. You really need to score the hard cards early on. You need to budget when you're gonna get some strikes, because at the end you're left with so few cards, so that's really difficult. We still haven't figured out how to win that yet, but I have to report my kid Louisa really likes the version, maybe a lot more than I do. I prefer the multiplayer version. Now, this being said, I played the multiplayer version only as a 2-player game, and I like it that way. The game allegedly goes up to 5 players. I'm not sure that I would want to go that high for the simple reason that there is anything for you to do when other players are taking their turns. You're just sitting there. There is no reason for you to plan ahead because the board will change so much with players doing all sort of things, of course, to the grid that you just have to look at your hand of cards at the beginning of your turn and see what happens. Even with 2 players, I tried to plan ahead, and even with 2 players, there wasn't really any point. But again, with 2 players, then the analysis paralysis, well, the waiting is not too much. Analysis paralysis is not that big of a deal, really, because you don't have a ton of cards to consider when the turn comes around to you. There will be certain cards that will be obviously impossible for you to score, so you're not even wasting your time thinking about it. Then you're looking at the 1, maybe 2 that you can possibly score, and you see how that can be done. So analysis paralysis is not so much the problem. Again, it's more like there is that element of waiting around when no one else, when there's nothing for you to do. And definitely there is that element of luck. Again, precisely because the board changes dramatically between turns, even with 2 players, and because certain patterns will be obvious. It is a game that's not going to be a brain burner. You will see, oh, I can score this one, or I can score that one. And you'll be able to score something virtually every turn, even if it's just like a little cute little teeny tiny point. But then somebody got lucky and they score a card with 5 points, and there's that luck element there. Which again, it's completely luck because some of the harder cards, there's no way you're gonna score them in a single turn. Unless the configuration is almost there, or there's no way you're going to set them up over multiple turns so your long-term strategy really pays off. It's a game with no long-term strategy. So there is the luck element that is definitely gonna strike from time to time. In the big scheme of things, everybody scores 10 cards, and so everybody should get a chance of getting some luck moments and some unlucky moments. But it may happen, somebody's really lucky, they score 3 cards because a configuration gives them the game, and then the game has been decided by luck in that instance. But again, that won't happen every time, and the game is short enough, then you set it up again. So what you have here is definitely a filler, definitely a light game that I would recommend playing mainly with young players, maybe as a play with your spouse game, if your spouse is not into hardcore games. Something quick, simple, and light that really looks nice, really looks impressive from the point of view of production. It's very simple, very intuitive, and as a light filler, as an abstract game, as long as you don't mind the luck element, I think this is a good representative of its category of simple, light, abstract fillers.